Hey fellas, this is Colin and you're watching Magic Strawberry. For this year's Halloween episode, I thought I would cover something very near and dear as it pertains to what I consider my favorite game of all time, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. But seeing that the magnificent mainstream Mike has already reviewed it and that the plot to the game itself doesn't really delve much into horror, my attention instead laid on his 20-hour expansion, Blood and Wine. I know that Blood and Wine is actually lighter in tone than the rest of the game, but it's got a murder mystery involving vampires, so it counts. This is The Witcher 3 Blood and Wine. As I said earlier, Blood and Wine is much lighter in tone than the rest of the game, where before we roamed the war-torn lands of Belen, the crime-infested walls of Novigrad, and the brutal isles of Skellige, we're now brought to Toussaint, a vassal state to the Nilfgaardian Empire, with Renaissance-inspired architecture and vibrant colors as far as the eye can see. What brings Geralt here in the first place is a couple of knights errant informing him of a contract written up by the Duchess Anna Henrietta. From this, Geralt learns of a series of murders happening in Beauclair, Toussaint's capital, which are perpetrated by the so-called Beasts of Beauclair, and he heads there at once to begin investigating. The second you enter Toussaint, it just feels like a different game. Everything from the score, the brighter and more saturated colors, the blue mountains in the background, it's completely antithetical from everything we've seen from the game thus far. A character that's as grim and morbid as Geralt feels oxymoronic, coming within even 20 miles of this place. Blood and Wine is first and foremost centered on vampires, including Regis, a faithful and beloved companion of Geralt's in Andrzej Sapkowski's novels. Though I will say this introduction relied heavily on players knowing that in the first place, and would definitely be lost on anyone seeing him for the first time. Nevertheless, Geralt becomes intertwined with Regis when they both find out they were both after the Beasts of Beauclair, which turns out to be a vampire named Detloff, who, like Regis, is a fellow higher vampire, the apex race of vampires who can only be killed by another higher vampire. It turns out, however, that Regis is protecting Detloff because he owes him a debt that could never be paid, and insists he can appeal to his good nature to stop the killings. I must say that CD Projekt did a fantastic job of taking Sapkowski's novels and expanding upon his unique take on vampires in such an intriguing way that you won't care that it's literally a story about vampires. Vampires isn't everything that this 20-hour expansion has to offer, however. Just like the core game, the missions are sometimes as intriguing as the main campaign itself due to how fleshed out and well written they are. Each mission is fully explored and incredibly thought out, well, except for the Knight for Hire mission, where you have to perform repetitive tasks precisely 15 times across the map. One mission that takes the cake is when you're roped into a tourney and have to perform feats against other knights to take the top prize. The boss battles are also improved from the core game as the fights against various vampires, and huge rolling creatures named Shalmars require you to be far more agile than the bosses in the main campaign. You can also dye your armor for the first time in Blood and Wine, and some colors like turquoise are often more abundant than others, and much to my chagrin, black was the hardest to find, so your best bet is to just find the recipe and make them yourself. There's also 5 more contracts to fulfill, 5 Grandmaster armor sets to find, and frankly enough content to warrant Blood and Wine being an extra game in and of itself. CD Projekt presents Blood and Wine as a retirement of sorts for Geralt of Rivia, a character who's been on the path for as long as he can remember. You're even given an estate as a reward for taking on the contract, a rather unfamiliar thing for Geralt as he's never had what you would call a forever home. Witchers are supposed to constantly be on the hunt, and as the saying goes, no Witcher has ever died in their bed. And in an expansion that takes us through one last stirring turn of events, it gives Geralt a lot to reflect on. Perhaps he's finally in a good place and no longer needs to roam all over the continent to prevent some world-ending disaster. He has as much money and resources as one would ever need thanks to his new vineyard and the money he received from the contracts, so he no longer has to accept other contracts. Whatever CD Projekt Red decides to do with Geralt of Rivia from here on, this is as worthy a send-off for him as any. As far as a rating goes, I don't think I could give one since I do view this expansion and the game itself as one cohesive package, and with that said, I definitely give The Witcher 3 a 10 out of 10, but for now I'll merely recommend that you play Blood and Wine if you own the game and haven't already. Thanks for watching Magic Strawberry. Feel free to hit the like button down below, subscribe to this channel, and follow us on Twitter at ZTV Goofing Off. See ya!